Attending a lecture by Maria Rebolita Gomez, I began to realize that the evolution of multicellularity in yeast and humans is not so different after all. Allow me to elaborate.
At first, it was beneficial to live as a unicellular entity, because one could be selfish with their resources and spatial distribution. Local resources are also less rapidly used up when you're unicellular because less resources are needed to fuel small organisms living on their own. Consider, for example, unicellular yeast cells when grown on an agar plate. Unicellular yeast cells are distributed across the plate and are able to access more resources per cell and increase their population size at a faster rate. In comparison, while multicellular yeast cells may start with a larger population size, they burn through their resources much faster, because the bigger you are, the more resources you need.
In spatially structured environments like an agar plate or early hunter-gatherer groups, resources are locally distributed in the surrounding area and cannot be transported in. Under these conditions, factors like population density and local competition are important because they place limits on growth. The concepts used to describe cellular yeast growth on an agar plate due to factors like local resources and spatial distribution can be used to describe human behavior in response to the same factors. Like unicellular yeast, humans began as nomads living in very small groups that only had to worry about acquiring enough food and resources for themselves. However, it became realized that while hunting for 2 is easier than hunting for 5 in terms of providing enough resources, by increasing your numbers, you could actually gather more resources. A single human may be able to hunt a mammal-like rodent, but the bigger your numbers, the bigger your kill, and the more food you get to bring home.
The evolution of multicellular organisms from a unicellular organism requires a large number of cells and a high degree of cooperation between cells. As multicellular clusters of yeast increase in size, cells in a patch become more crowded, increasing local competition. Consistent with this idea, fitness of multicellular phenotypes decreases very rapidly as the average size of clusters increases.
The same can be said for humans. As populations grow, local resources become rapidly exhausted and resource use becomes unsustainable. For example, it was quickly learned that growing the same crops on the same plot of land season after season rapidly turned the land infertile.
When resources in space do not support multicellular yeast, yeast cell complexes can revert back to unicellular.
In a study done by Radcliffe, the cost of multicellularity in a spatially structured environment, like an agar plate, was enough to rapidly select for the reversal to unicellularity. Reversals in plates took about 2 weeks for all of the 10 populations studied. Humans can't revert back to unicellular organisms the way yeast can when conditions no longer support multicellularity. Instead, when resources in space do not support large human populations, some humans revert back to some of the selfish behaviors observed in unicellular yeast, such as acquiring all surrounding resources for themselves.
Legacies of colonialism, of where resources are coming from and where do they get to go and things like that. That's where I think evolution provides a little bit of explanation, and then we need to add all this other complexity that comes from other processes.
Perhaps if humans learned how to fairly distribute resources amongst themselves, the environment's local resources would not be diminishing as rapidly as they are, and competition between neighbors would not be so high.
What is interesting is that multicellularity of yeast cells is favored in fluid environments such as liquid broth of test tubes. Resources are evenly distributed across the environment, with most cells having equal access. In these conditions, cooperation between cells is likely to be favored because the bigger you are, the more resources you can acquire, and competition within a group is minimized because resources are plentiful enough to limit competition.
The reason I find this interesting is because I think the answer to higher cooperation between humans is better fluidity of resources. If resources such as food and water were equally distributed amongst humans, then cooperation would be favored and competition would be limited. Humans have evolved and achieved such survival success due to their social nature and ability to live in small groups that cooperate, share resources, and care for one another. However, I think that as human populations have grown and our neighbors have become more spatially distant, we have forgotten that we are all connected and share the same resources. Us humans are all still from the same tribe. We're just a lot larger now, and cooperation is needed now more than ever to make sure that the resources that are left are equally distributed. Thanks for watching. And if you're interested in learning more about the evolution of multicellularity, then click the links attached to this video. Bye!